Let's do that hockey.
Hey everybody, welcome to another Dopper Prospects Radio podcast, episode 128. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Peter Harling. Appreciate you listening and downloading and subscribing and sharing and 5-star reviewing and all the things you do to help make this podcast a little bit more accessible and enjoyable for everyone. I have a couple of more episodes to come at you with content from the 2022 NHL Draft, and I'm really excited about this episode and the one coming up next. So today I'm going to post my conversation I had on round 2 of the draft, day 2, with Julie Robenhymer. She is well known from EliteProspects. She's a contributor there, and I had a chance to catch up with her and talk to her about some of the players picked in the first round from the U.S. National Team Development Program. Specifically, we talked about Logan Cooley and his upside, his ETA, some of the things he needs to work on. He ended up going to Arizona with the 3rd overall pick. We talk about Cutter Gauthier, who has fantasy upside as well. Very multi-cat friendly player there. And we talk a lot about Lane Hutson as well, who was a later 2nd round pick, but a player I'm really curious to follow his development as well. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get Lane in any of my fantasy drafts, but I tried. So without any further ado, let's jump to my conversation I had with Julie Robenhymer, and I encourage you to follow her on Twitter at Julie Robenhymer and catch some of her work. I hope you enjoy the interview.
All right, so still the NHL entry draft on day 2, and I'm now joined by EliteProspects Julie Robenhymer. Julie, thanks for giving me a minute.
You're welcome.
So I want to talk to Julie about the U.S. National Team Development Program players, because there's a bunch of them in this draft. It's like the 2019 draft. I think it's kind of similar in quantity, if not quality of players, but there's a bunch of guys that picked in the first round, and a few I kind of wanted to pick your brain on. So let's start at the top of the list and go with Logan Cooley.
Yeah.
Cooley goes ahead of Shane Wright, which was a little bit of a surprise, but not a surprise that he went to Arizona. That's where a lot of people had him mocked. One of the players I think might have one of the higher offensive upsides in this draft, and that translates real well to fantasy hockey. What can you tell me about Cooley, his upside, his ETA, those kind of projections?
What I like about Cooley is his creative thinking and the quality of his hands and how he's able to just stick handle his way through any situation. I like his speed. I like the way he scans the play, looking for options. He doesn't necessarily go for the first option he sees. He does take some time to look for the best option. So he's got a lot of really translatable skills, and one of the things that I think Arizona liked about him is his ability to electrify an arena in what he does.
Get people out of their seats.
Yeah.
Highlight real plays.
Yeah. A, he'll get people in the seats, and then B, once they're in the seats, they'll be up out of their seats because he is so exciting to watch. Even if he doesn't score, he often, anytime he is in the offensive zone, it leads to a scoring chance. And so that thought always gets people excited because at some point you just always assume they're going to go in. So there's that. There are some things that he's going to have to work on at Minnesota. And I think Bob Motzko is going to help him with that. And that's his perimeter play. He kind of sticks to the outside. He doesn't drive the center of the ice. He doesn't go to the dirty areas. One could argue that he's a fairly soft player in that sense. So I'd love to see him add some sandpaper, some grit, some jam to his game. Even if that's just more of a willingness to go if that's where the best option is. Because he doesn't necessarily have that willingness. He kind of wants to protect himself, protect the puck in that way and keep it safe. So I think in terms of projection, he'll definitely spend at least 1 year at Minnesota. It probably would behoove him physically to stay 2 years. I don't think he's going to have the physical maturation necessary in terms of his size, his strength to withstand playing against men. I think him being at Minnesota is going to, and playing a college game for the entire season is going to, one, benefit him with more time in the gym, and B, be an eye-opener that he is not, in fact, ready to play against men.
Well, there'd be no rush for Arizona to expedite him into the roster. They're not in a winning situation at this point yet, but that'll be interesting to see how long he stays in Minnesota. That's a good place for him to get some time in the weight room, round out his defensive game.
Yeah, he needs it.
All right, so another player I kind of want to pick your brain on here real quick is Gauthier. Big power forward. Like his offensive upside. I just like the way he can impact the game pretty much however you want to play it. He's not a liability defensively. He can play physical. He can play an offensive game. Tell me a little bit about his projectability.
Well, he could, in the next, we'll say 3 to 5 years, be the new G in Philadelphia. So he brings that kind of all-around game, as you mentioned, power forward, willingness to go to the net, willingness to play the dirty areas, willingness to use his size. That's one of the things, you can be a big guy, but if you don't use it, what good is it? And so he's one that definitely embraces that part of his game. And then, of course, his shot, it's a cannon. It's good. There's a lot to like about it. Yeah, he brings a lot to the table. Again, another guy going to college, going to Boston College, and I think he'll benefit tremendously just because of his size and strength where it's at right now. I could see potentially him only staying 1 year at Boston College. I'm a big proponent that you always stay for 2. You never leave unless it's a sure thing, in my opinion, unless you are ready to jump in and fill in on an NHL roster. So we'll see how he is after 1 year, because like I said, he does have the size and the strength to be able to compete against men that would give him a better opportunity to find quicker success.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Maple Leafs Matthew Nyes. Big player, good skill.
Yes.
Influences the game in multiple ways.
Yes, very much so.
And he stayed for 2 seasons.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where again, I'm a big proponent. You don't leave anywhere unless you're ready to go to the NHL. If you have a place. Now, Canadian juniors is a totally different ball of wax because of the age limit. But, even European players who, have a good situation and a good development system, stay there. And it's the same in college. You have a long runway. Use it if you need it.
Yeah.
And most kids are just so anxious to get to the NHL that they forget that the goal isn't just to get there, it's to stay there, it's to be an impact player. So if you are committed to your development, you should be committed to your complete development and not just wait for an NHL team to show interest.
All right, so on the other side of the size spectrum, you go from Gauthier to Lane Hutson. I'm really fascinated by this prospect file in Lane Hutson. He's got really great skill. He's got a 6-foot wingspan, but the guy's only 5'8".
Yeah.
Hoping to get to 5'10". Terrific skater. If he were 6 foot, even just 6 feet, I think we would have seen him get drafted last night in round 1. But he was, I believe, a later second round pick today. What can you tell me about Lane?
What I like about him is his creative thinking and his stick skills, passing, his ability to read the play. All of that is really, really beneficial for him. And that is what makes him stand out as a player, what he can do with the puck on his stick. The challenge for him is his skating. His skating and his size. Obviously, his size plays a factor. It's much harder to defend the puck when you're 5'8", especially as a defenseman. Having that net front presence is not a thing.
Right.
So that's a challenge. He's going to have to focus on his physical strength, his leg strength, not get knocked over on his skates all that much. But the real challenge is him actually playing defense. with his skating inefficiencies. So it's one of those things where he could potentially develop into a special teams specialist with the right pairing, with the right development in terms of improving his skating, or finding ways to be successful without improving his skating, being a guy who thinks outside the box when it comes to, positional defense. So that's what's interesting about him. He is, as you mentioned, if he was just a little bit taller, if he was just a little bit faster, a little bit more agile, he 100% would have gone in the first round. So we'll see. He's an interesting project.
Right. So you're saying that he lacks some defensive influence, but for fantasy hockey, that's okay. There aren't stats for defense. But if you can't play defense, then you're not in the NHL, and that undermines everything. Is that a hurdle he can overcome? Will he play in the NHL? Best guess?
Well, I think he has a will to play in the NHL. And when you have the will to play in the NHL, you're usually willing to put in the work necessary to improve whatever needs to be improved to get there. So, any guy who plays at the U.S. National Team Development Program, I never underestimate.
Right.
They know what it takes. They are willing to put in the work. They have made tremendous sacrifices to achieve this goal, and they're going to push for it until somebody tells them it's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, I hope he makes it because I plan on drafting him in my fantasy leagues. So thanks very much for your time, Julie. I really appreciate it. Let's go back to the draft.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks.